third installment of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Today I'll be reading Chapter 3, They Eat Your Eyes, They Eat Your Nose. Here is the image that starts us off. Yummy. There are scary stories about all kinds of things. The ones told here are about a grave, a witch, a man who liked to swim, a hunting trip, and a market basket. There also is one about worms eating a corpse. Your corpse. The Hearse Song. Now, fun fact, my mother, for whatever reason, loves the Hearse Song and sang it to me as a child. So I'm going to try and sing her tune, whatever it is. I hope it's the right one. If it's not, let me know in the comments, because this is what I grew up with. Don't you ever laugh as the hearse goes by, for you may be the next to die. They wrap you up in a big white sheet from your head down to your feet. They put you in a big black box and cover you up with dirt and rocks. All goes well for about a week. Then your coffin begins to leak. The worms crawl in, the worms crawl out. The worms lay pinochle on your snout. They eat your eyes, they eat your nose. They eat the jelly between your toes. Big green worm with rolling eyes crawls in your stomach and out your eyes. Your stomach turns a slimy green and pus pours out like whipping cream. You spread it on a slice of bread, and that's what you eat when you are dead. That sounds delicious, right? Yeah. Okay, and there are notes in here alongside the image, so if you read music, please let me know. I'm unable to read music. I am on Duolingo, though. I'm learning 7 different languages at the same time. I probably shouldn't, but I really like it. But no, I do not know how to read music. The first story of Chapter 3, The Girl Who Stood on a Grave. Some boys and girls were at a party one night. There was a graveyard down the street, and they were talking about how scary it was. Don't ever stand on a grave after dark, one of the boys said. The person inside will grab you. They'll pull you under. That's not true, one of the girls said. It's just a superstition. I'll give you $1 if you stand on a grave, said the boy. A grave doesn't scare me, said the girl. I'll do it right now. The boy handed her his knife. Stick this knife in one of the graves, he said. Then we'll know you were there. The graveyard was filled with shadows and was as quiet as death. There's nothing to be scared of, the girl told herself, but she was scared anyway. She picked out a grave and stood on it. Then quickly she bent over and plunged the knife into the soil, and she started to leave. But she couldn't get away. Something was holding her back. She tried a second time to leave, but she couldn't move. She was filled with terror. Something has got me, she screamed, and she fell to the ground. When she didn't come back, the others went to look for her. They found her body sprawled across the grave without realizing it. She had plunged the knife through her skirt and had pinned it to the ground. It was only the knife that held her. She had died of fright. I wonder if anyone has cosplayed as that character. That'd be fun. Our second story of Chapter 3, A New Horse. For folks who follow me on TikTok and Instagram, I did try to do some scary story retellings before, but my camera messed up and I barely got any footage at all. And what I did salvage, I put onto TikTok and Instagram, and I did read A New Horse. Now, A New Horse is just an odd one to me, full of miscommunication, but we're going to read it again here. We're going to read it anyway, and you let me know what you think about it, because I think miscommunication is the root of all evil. A New Horse. 2 farmhands shared a room. One slept at the back of the room. The other slept near the door. After a while, the one who slept near the door began to feel very tired early in the day. His friend asked what was wrong. An awful thing happens every night, he said. A witch turns me into a horse and rides me all over the countryside. I'll sleep in your bed tonight, his friend said. We'll see what happens to me. About midnight, an old woman who lived nearby came into the room. She mumbled some strange words over the farmhand and found he couldn't move. Then she slipped a bridle on him and he turned into a horse. The next thing he knew, she was riding him across the fields at breakneck speed, beating him to make him go even faster. Soon they came to a house where a party was going on. There was a lot of music and dancing. They were having a big time inside. Was there a rush of any kind? She hitched him to a fence and went in. While she was gone, the farmhand rubbed against the fence until the bridle came off, and he turned back into a human being. Then he went into the house and found the witch. He spoke those strange words over her, and with the bridle he turned her into a horse. Then he rode her to a blacksmith and had her fitted with horseshoes. After that, he rode her to the farm where she lived. I have a pretty good filly here, he told her husband, but I need a stronger horse. Would you like to trade? The old man looked her over, and he said he would do it. So they picked out another horse, and the farmhand rode away. Her husband led his new horse to the barn. He took off the bridle and went to hang it up, but when he came back, the new horse was gone. Instead, there stood his wife with horseshoes nailed to her hands and feet. Just a warning, I will not be reading the 6th story of Chapter 3 of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. The 4th story of Chapter 3, Alligators. A young woman in town married a man from another part of the country. He was a nice fellow, and they got along pretty well together. There was only one problem. Every night he'd go swimming in the river. Sometimes he'd be gone all night long, and she would complain about how lonely she was. This couple had 2 young sons. As soon as the boys began to walk, their father taught them how to swim. And when they got to be old enough, he took them swimming in the river at night. Often they would stay there all night long, and the young woman would stay home all by herself. After a while, she began to act in a strange way. At least that's what the neighbors said. She told them that her husband was turning into an alligator and that he was trying to turn the boys into alligators. Everybody told her there was nothing wrong with a man taking his son swimming. That was a natural thing to do. And when it came to alligators, there just weren't any nearby. Everybody knew that. Early one morning, the young woman came running into town from the direction of the river. She was soaking wet. She said a big alligator and 2 little alligators had pulled her in and had tried to get her to eat a raw fish. They were her husband and her son, she said, and they wanted her to live with them, but she had gotten away. Her doctor decided she had lost her mind, and he had her put in the hospital for a while. After that, nobody saw her husband or the boys again. They just disappeared. But now and then, a fisherman would tell about seeing alligators in the river at night. Usually it was 1 big alligator and 2 small ones. But people said they were just making it up. Everybody knows there aren't any alligators around here. Our 5th story, Room for One More. A man named Joseph Blackwell came to Philadelphia on a business trip. He stayed with friends in the big house they owned outside the city. That night, they had a good time visiting. But when Blackwell went to bed, he tossed and turned and couldn't sleep. Sometime during the night, he heard a car turn into the driveway. He went to the window to see who was arriving at such a late hour. In the moonlight, he saw a long black hearse filled with people. The driver of the hearse looked up at him. When Blackwell saw his queer, hideous face, he shuddered. The driver called to him, "There is room for one more." Bet. Rude. Then he waited for a minute or 2 and he drove off. In the morning, Blackwell told his friends what had happened. "You were dreaming," he said. "I must have been," he said. high above the city in one of the new office buildings there. Late in the afternoon, he was waiting for an elevator to take him back down to the street. But when it arrived, it was very crowded. One of the passengers looked out and called to him. There was room for one more. It was the driver of the hearse. No thanks, said Blackwell. I'll get the next one. The doors closed and the elevator started down. There was shrieking and screaming, then the sound of a crash. The elevator had fallen to the bottom of the shaft. Everyone aboard was killed. Fun fact, in another life, my partner would have been an elevator technician, but the one thing that kept them from becoming an elevator technician is like the elevator crashing or them falling in the elevator shaft, because usually when elevator technicians go out there, it's just one person. There's no buddy system, there's no one looking out for you, so if a clip falls or like you fall for whatever reason, anything happens, you're down there, and it might be hours and hours and hours until anyone finds you or anyone hears you. And unfortunately, this is a very real reality for many elevator technicians everywhere. So, if you know an elevator technician in your life, thank them and bless them however you can, however that looks for you. If you believe in that, give them a little extra luck, because they need it and they deserve it. Not that story. The seventh story of chapter 3, The Dead Man's Brains. This scary story is a scary game that people play at Halloween, but it can be played wherever the spirit moves you. The players sit in a circle in a darkened room and listen to a storyteller describe the rotting remains of a corpse. Each part is passed around for them to feel. In one version, a player is out if he or she screams or gasps with fright. In another version, everybody stays to the end, no matter how scared they get. Here's the story. Once in this town, there lived a man named Brown. It was years ago on this night that he was murdered out of spite. We have here his remains. First, let's feel his brains. A wet, squishy tomato. Now here are his eyes, still frozen with surprise. 2 peeled grapes. This is his nose, a chicken bone. Here is his ear, a dried apricot. And here is his hand, rotting flesh and bone, a cloth or rubber glove filled with mud or ice. But his hair still grows, a handful of corn silk or wet fur or yarn. And his heart still beats, now and then, a piece of raw liver. And his blood still flows. Dip your fingers in it, it's nice and warm. A bowl of catsup thinned with warm water. That's all there is, except for these worms. They are the ones that ate the rest of him. A handful of wet cooked spaghetti noodles. If you would like to play this game with me in a future video where I bring out all of these props, please let me know and I'll be happy to oblige. Here's the picture associated with the dead man's brains. She looks very welcoming and very warm. And then, of course, we have a decapitated head. Our final story of Chapter 3 of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. May I Carry Your Basket? Sam Lewis spent the evening playing chess at his friend's house. It was about midnight when they finished their game, and he started home. Outside, it was icy cold and as quiet as the grave. As he came around a turn in the road, he was surprised to see a woman walking ahead of him. She was carrying a basket covered with a white cloth. When he got up to her, he looked to see who it was, but she was so bundled up against the cold, it was hard to see her face. Good evening, Sam said. What brings you out so late? But she didn't answer. Then he said, May I carry your basket? She handed it to him. From under the cloth, a small voice said, That's very nice of you. And that was followed by wild laughter. Sam was so startled that he dropped the basket, and out rolled a woman's head. He looked at the head and he stared at the woman. "It's her head," he cried. And he started to run, and the woman and her head began to chase him. Soon the head caught up to him. It bounded into the air and sunk its teeth into his left leg. Sam screamed with pain and ran faster, but the woman and her head stayed right behind. Soon the head leaped into the air again and bit into his other leg. Then they were gone. I like this story. I think this is my favorite one so far. I gotta get me a basket like one of these, man. This is the life. And that concludes Chapter 3 of Scary Stories Tell in the Dark. I hope you will join me for Chapters 4 and 5. They'll coming out later this month to celebrate October and Halloween, or if you celebrate any other October holiday, rock on. I hope you had a spooky, scary time, and that you will join me for Chapters 4 and 5 coming out later this month. I hope you have a lovely day, night, or wherever